Undertale neutral endings don't get talked about enough, and I believe it's because no one really understands how complex they are. Since there are so many possibilities to track down and research, it can be overwhelming. Luckily, after doing my own research, I'm willing to teach you all the endings in the most satisfying way I can, so maybe you can also appreciate the neutral endings too. Also, a disclaimer, since this is a guide video, the pacing will be more straightforward and fast than my usual discussion videos. Hope you understand. Alright, let's get into it. For an introduction, let's start with the obvious. The endings highly depend on who you spare or kill in your run, but a few things to clear up first is there's also Easter egg variants of certain endings. For example, if you played the game without eating food, never saving the game, never switching your armor, or keeping that snowman piece from Snowden, they will be mentioned by Sans at the beginning of his phone calls. But keep in mind that all endings I go through will be strictly story-based. One thing to understand though is the outcome of certain characters will highly depend on who's in charge of the underground. In this case, Tori will take the throne for Asgore after he dies in battle. Anyways, like I said, Toria will take over for Asgore after he dies, and being the caring mother figure she is, her first order of business will be passing a law where all humans who fall down to the underground won't be treated as enemies anymore. How everyone responds to this is based on how many monsters you, the player, have killed. The policy can be accepted by the monsters of the underground, but if the players killed more than 2 people, the backlash would result in a rebellion. If Undyne was alive, she would have led this rebellion herself, overthrowing Toriel and banishing her back to the ruins. If Undyne isn't here, then Toriel would have forfeited the throne to avoid fighting her people, pacifism and all that. Once Toriel returns to the ruins, with or without Undyne in the picture, Sans, figuring out the identity of the mysterious woman in the door, will visit her often, with Papyrus of course. Though if Papyrus was killed during your run, he'll move in with her instead, not having much of a reason to stay in his old home. I'll save the peace acceptance timeline for later since it's a bit complex, but right now here's the timeline overview. If Toriel wasn't around to take the throne, Undyne would have taken over without the need of a rebellion. Under her authority, Undyne would have waged war against humanity. She's consistent in this decision even when she overthrows Toriel in the other timeline. Although it's unclear what her plan would have been, she's more focused on breaking this barrier. As a consequence to killing Toriel, Sans will remark how the woman he's been talking to in the woods hasn't been answering for a while. But if Papyrus was killed during your run, Sans will put 2 and 2 together and know you killed Toriel just like how you killed Papyrus. This one's a pretty short timeline. Now is a good time to address Metaton and his effect on the story. You might have noticed I didn't mention him or Alphys in the previous endings. That's because the 2 characters don't affect much other than a passive mention from Sans, and even then it only affects Undyne by fueling fires that she was going to start anyway. You could say this is because the endings are told from Sans' perspective and his relationship with Alphys is ambiguous at best. Still, I'll only go by what's written in the game. With that being said, Metaton will actually affect the story after Undyne is killed. He takes over the throne and turns the underground into what I imagine as a cyberpunk wasteland where his show brainwashes people and everyone who dislikes him disappears. He spends his time finding Alphys after realizing he wasn't the best to her, but she's nowhere to be found. Oh, and Papyrus and Sans would have been his agents. They would have been hired as his agents. Unless you kill Papyrus, then it's just Sans. This is weirdly one of those timelines where Sans doesn't mention his brother. Now is a good time to also address Papyrus's character. Like Alphys, he doesn't affect the story through his actions, but more so in relation to another character. The only difference this time is we get slightly more insight on Papyrus's effect because we're getting the phone calls from Sans. Duh. But also, I don't believe this makes Papyrus a bad character in any way. He's grounded by being so naive, even when in positions of authority. By process of elimination, if Metaton was killed along with Toriel and Undyne, Papyrus will be picked to rule the underground. But when his suspicion rises to the whereabouts of his friends, Sans lies to him and tells Papyrus that his friends are on vacation and that they won't come back. With no other main character around, this is the only ending where Papyrus gets the role of king. But if Papyrus was killed along with the other main characters, then you get the empty variants. But I'm gonna stop here to address the peace acceptance ending that I kinda left behind earlier. How everyone responds to this is based on how many monsters you, the player, have killed. The policy could be rejected by the monsters of the underground, leading to a rebellion, but if the player killed less than 2 people, the peace policy would be accepted, resulting in the disbandment of the Royal Guard, leaving Undyne and Papyrus unemployed. Undyne actually has a very interesting path in this part of the timeline, because if you killed her while sparing Toriel, then Undyne's death alone would push the narrative to the rebellion timeline, even if she's the only character you've killed. Hopefully now you see why I had to save this convoluted part of the timeline for later, because this ending technically cannot happen without Undyne, if that makes sense. And Papyrus too, but we'll get to him later. This time her status is more reliant on whether you befriended her or not. For example, if you never befriended Undyne, she'll blame the player for Asgore's death and make plans to cross the barrier and beat you up. Papyrus suggests you to not come back because of this. But if you befriended Undyne, but killed monsters either before or after meeting her, she'll get the betrayal ending, where Undyne feels betrayed and angry that she trusted you, and yet you killed monsters despite that, and makes plans to not beat you up, but to straight up kill you. But if you befriended Undyne and did not kill any monsters, she'll be the Undyne we know and love, and despite her losing her job, she'll just try to help Alphys in her lab as, something to do. Rather, before, she was just working in Sans' hot dog stand, which she hated. Metaton won't have much effect on the events of the story, but if the player killed Metaton, Undyne would be affected by the loss of Asgore and Alphys, and she'll be too depressed to take revenge on you. It's implied Alphys may have committed in the True Lab due to losing Metaton, though I don't think that's proven. Also, can she not just rebuild the robot? But if Metaton is still alive, but Alphys never dated the player, she would grow more reclusive, still feeling guilty over her sins. But if she did date you and therefore is forgiven for her experiments, sorta, at least I imagine she's forgiven, she's more open and willing to work harder to repair the barrier. That's a crazy sentence to say. If she dated you, she wouldn't be so depressed. Despite his position in the Royal Guard being taken away, Papyrus would take it well, being the positive guy he is. Papyrus does have the same effect as Undyne, where it's automatically set to the rebellion path if he's the only one you killed. Anyway, here's the full timeline overview. Tried to make it as simple as possible, but if you're still confused, you could rewatch this video back or watch someone who's smarter than me. There are 3 variants of the empty endings. The first one is the annoying dog ending, where you kill all the boss monsters, yet not killing or sparing anyone else. Some white dog becomes president, and Sans weirdly thanks you for this. This is one of the only times he is completely fine with Papyrus being gone. But if you killed all bosses and one mini-boss in each area, Sans says everyone feels hopeless since there's no leader anymore. And also, if you killed more than 20 monsters, he tells you to go to hell. I don't think that makes that much of a difference, in my opinion. If you follow the genocide route until Hotlands, where you stop altogether and play normally, Alphys will save all the monsters and hide them in the True Lab, where they elect her as leader. And that should be all of them. Well, there's also the dirty hacker ending, but I don't really count that one since you're not supposed to find that in the base game. Hopefully my explanation helped you gain a better understanding of the endings, despite some being harder to understand than others, in my opinion. If Toriel's peace policy was not received well in the rebellion, Toriel forfeits the throne because Undyne's not around to throw her out. For some reason, Mettaton doesn't take that opportunity to take over since both Toriel and Undyne are not in the picture anymore. But I don't know, maybe it takes over after Sans' phone call, but again, that's not proven. But still, it's interesting to see how these characters react to certain situations because it gives them more depth. I also notice how in all the peaceful endings, Undyne has more character complexity, in my opinion, and Alphys has more impact on the plot, and Papyrus is Papyrus. It's almost like the story is expanded the more you lean into the pacifist route. Hey, this is Marx-Oliver. I had to do a re-recording of the ending because I realized I didn't know what I was talking about. What I was gonna point out was how Undyne had more character depth than just waging war, and how Alphys became more open to the other characters. It resulted in a happier timeline because I thought the peace endings gave the characters more opportunities. But that was a stupid take because even in peaceful endings, Undyne is still antagonistic towards Frisk and humans in general. Even if you never killed anybody, Alphys is still depressed over what she did and isolates herself, and Papyrus is Papyrus regardless of what happens to him, including death. There's a reason these are neutral endings. At the end of everything, you helped some people, you harmed others. Some characters improve, some stagnate, some even suffer. Power structures don't change someone's morals, but relationships can. For the pacifist route to happen, you have to go out of your way to build a good relationship with everybody, and Azrael still got left behind in the end. Even in the most peaceful outcomes, the chances of absolute peace for everybody is zero. So maybe Undertale does advocate for peace and pacifism. It never said it blocks you or the people around you from suffering. So the real moral is, you can't save everybody, even if you tried. Not because you're a bad person, but because true peace requires universal participation, and sometimes that's not even enough. So the only true freedom you have is the choice in being kind. Now with that bittersweet conclusion out of the way, here's a meme of Deltarune to cheer you up.
Nigga, where your mom at, nigga? Hey, nigga, where your mom at, nigga? Where your mom at, nigga?
Of course, my ballerina is low. As soon as my computer has been, as soon as I get to recording, everything goes wrong. Jesus Christ. As Undyne, where if he dies during your playthrough and get tutorial, what the fuck? Ooh, hold on. Ooh, my foot was numb, sorry. All bosses. Oops, hold on. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Okay. Get a lot of this guy. Despite certain details being harder to remember than others. Jesus, fuck. Bro, I've been messing up names all day. I called Toriel Tutorial. I called Papyrus Papyrus. Am I gonna call Undyne Undone? But then I remembered if you killed a monster before or after befriending the story is expanding the more we lean into the pacifism I will murder your friends and family. Anyway, I think that's enough rereads. I'm going to end recording for now and enjoy my food. Yeah.